Hello and welcome to Maximum Disc, a show where I celebrate physical media and talk about films that I own on Blu Ray and 4K Blu Ray. I'm James Adamson. I'm a co-host on the Double Reel Film Podcast. If you like this chat about physical media, please do check out Double Reel. It's a monthly magazine podcast designed to give film nerds like you and me something new to watch. Hopefully you tune into any episode, you get some great recommendations instead of just relying on the algorithm. That's a sales pitch for the podcast, but now we're talking about physical media. Why does it matter? Well, short version, if you care about a film, you need to own it. You can't rely on the streamers to make it available. You'd be surprised how many things, when you go looking for them, aren't there. The choice isn't always brilliant. The version of the film is not always the right one. The director's cut that's got all the bits in it that make the film work, it's hard to find that on streaming. And most of all, it just won't look and sound its best on a compressed internet file compared to on a proper disc on your shelf. So hopefully you already convert to that if you've clicked on this video to have a listen. So I'm going to talk like I do every episode about one film that I own. I'll talk about how it sounds and how it looks. Is it a good transfer? How does it stand up to the original? I'll talk about my experience with the film, why I came to care about it and want to own it and all of those things. And offer my opinion at the end about whether I think this is an essential purchase for your collection. Only my opinion, but hopefully it'll help you make your own mind up and generally just encourage you to start or add to a collection of your own. So today we're talking about Solaris on Blu Ray. Solaris came out in 1972. It was directed by Andrei Tarkovsky. It's a Russian film. Andrei Tarkovsky is a legend of Soviet cinema and of science fiction, although I'm not sure how comfortable he was with that genre. 7 films feature films directed by him, most of which are regarded among the best films ever to come out of that period of Russia, the Soviet Union. While his talent was highly regarded, he had a much more difficult relationship with the Soviet film system, the likes of Sergei Bondarchuk and especially Eisenstein, who were much more ideologically aligned to the regime. The issues seem to be mainly creative rather than ideological, however, even though his discussion of faith and other issues in his films wasn't on message. He pioneered a slow, hypnotic style of cinema, which serves to draw the viewer in and make them think about what they're watching in the quiet moments. It also helped him to make films his way by, in his view, boring Soviet censors into submission. We did Stalker on this channel already, regarded by many as his best film, although Solaris, I think, is his most widely seen. The screenplay is by Tarkovsky with Frederick Gorenstein, based on the novel by Polish sci-fi author Stanislaw Lem. Lem collaborated to an extent on the adaptation, but ended up disagreeing with their interpretation of his book in the film, as is often the case. The cast is people I don't really know outside of either this film or the other Tarkovsky films I've seen. Donatas Banionis is in the lead, and Natalia Bondarchuk is in the film, daughter of Sergei. Yuri Yava, Vladislav Jozetsky, Nikolai Grinko, Anatoly Solenitsyn. I probably butchered all of those names. Grinko and Solenitsyn in particular were in Tarkovsky's Stalker, so I recognise them from that. The cinematography is by Vadim Yusov, a Russian director of photography who worked in Tarkovsky's first 3 films and also worked with Sergei Bondarchuk. In terms of sound, the only person credited is Semyon Litvinov. Note that as well as providing the usual sound design and effects, some actors have their voices dubbed, including the lead actor Banionis. This was reasonably common in Soviet cinema at the time, and Banionis had a strong Lithuanian accent that Russian viewers found distracting. The score is by Eduard Artemyev. He was a pioneer of electronic music and also influenced by Indian classical music. In this film, he mixes synthesizers with variations on Bach to add to the dreamlike and disorienting atmosphere Tarkovsky's looking to build throughout the film. And Artemyev also worked on Tarkovsky's film Stalker, which I've done on this channel before. In terms of awards and nominations recognition, it's kind of a mixed bag, actually. At Cannes, it won the Grand Prix, which is one level below the Palme d'Or, for which it was also nominated. It also won the Cannes Fipresci Prize. I'm not entirely sure what that is, if I'm honest. A small number of other nominations came from people like the Chicago Critics Circle and a nomination at the Academy of Science Fiction Awards for 1976, which is when it was eventually released in the USA. The lack of awards at the time could be due to restrictions on Soviet films being seen widely outside Russia, and the fact that the version shown in the US to begin with was cut by 30 minutes. Over time, it's developed a huge reputation, and that's from people finally coming to see the film. gets seen in its full version, builds its reputation. It's one of Stanley Kubrick's favourite films, even though Tarkovsky openly criticised 2001, and this film is seen as somewhat as an antidote to Kubrick's sort of big science fiction epic. Other admirers include Christopher Nolan, who was influenced by this for Inception and also to an extent for Interstellar. Akira Kurosawa was a big admirer of the film as well. It was an influence on all sorts of other sci-fi films like Another Earth and Sunshine. You'll see it in various films once you watch it. This regularly shows up on lists of the all-time greatest science fiction films and was remade by Steven Soderbergh in the early 2000s with George Clooney in the main role. That version is generally regarded as inferior, but it's still kind of interesting. Quick summary of what the film's about. The background to this film is that Tarkovsky wanted to adapt the novel. He was interested in that film, in making a film of that book. But he also didn't like 2001. He intended this film as a riposte to that in some respects. He saw Kubrick's film as cold, sterile, and fake, his words. He wanted to add more of a human element to a space sort of science fiction story and not spend so much time on designing spaceships that people only focused on the sets and special effects. In terms of summary of the plot, psychologist Chris Kelvin is one of a group of eminent scientists and professionals of various types involved in the study of Solaris, a planet covered in what is apparently an intelligent, sentient ocean. He's sent to an aging space station over Solaris to evaluate whether the space station should be closed down. A station once built for over 80 people now has only 3 men living on it, one of whom is an old friend of Kelvin, but has just killed himself just before Kelvin's arrival. What emerges is that in their desperation to understand or get a reaction from Solaris, they've been bombarding it with radiation. And since then, the people on board have been visited by versions of people they love or from their past. Kelvin, when he arrives, is visited by his dead wife, and he relives all the trauma and obsession of his past with her. He proceeds to get further and further caught up in the mysteries of Solaris and his own personal challenges and the limits of human attempts to find and understand extraterrestrial intelligence when they're still wrestling with their own problems and their own selves. It's kind of, as much as 2001 gets mentioned, this gets referred to as the Soviet 2001, but it's got as much to do with like Vertigo and Crime and Punishment as anything else. You know, the inevitability of your past coming back to haunt you, which is a theme that Tarkovsky saw in a book, which Stanislav Lem thought he was over-focusing on that and not focusing on the other aspects of it. I think the key quote from the book that is used in the film is really important. Says, "We have no need of other worlds. We need mirrors. We don't know what to do with other worlds. A single world, our own, suffices us. We can't accept it for what it is." And I think that what that tells you about this film is about reflection, self-reflection. It's oddly seen as his most accessible film, and by him as a failure, because he didn't think he broke free enough from the shackles of the sci-fi genre. You get so preoccupied with a space station and the details of being out on a distant planet that he didn't think he spent enough time exploring the themes of the story, which I think that's just an example of filmmakers being obsessed with how far they were from where they wanted to be, not how far they came with what they achieved in the film. So my background with the film is, over time I was just aware that there was a Russian equivalent to 2001. I was aware that it was more art house. Read about it, heard about it. Basically bought the Blu Ray on spec. Took me a while to get around to watching it, but I did absolutely love it. Watched it for my podcast, and just when we were discussing the remake, watched it a number of times. It's an intense, hypnotic experience. It's it's full of paradoxes. It's a futuristic film about being stuck in the past. It doesn't really make much effort to look that futuristic because it's not that interested in it, similar to sort of, Godard when he was doing Alphaville. Each time you watch the film, it's different. The first time I was following and trying to get my head around the story. Next, I was absorbing all the visuals and getting caught up in the atmosphere. Another viewing of this film, I just found myself lost in my own thoughts about which of my own loved ones and memories might haunt me if I came into contact with a phenomenon like Solaris. So it's a really, like Stalker, like Tarkovsky films generally, it really sort of worms its way into your consciousness. Beautifully made, but also it really does have an effect on you. It really gets into your head. which in a way is like going to Solaris itself. You go up there and you find yourself reflecting on things. Okay, so let's talk about the disc. The version I've got is the Curzon Artificial Eye Blu Ray, which came out about 10 years ago. It's 2 discs. There is also a Criterion version of this, and they both use the same source, which was a very strong restoration of an original negative. The version I've got is going out of stock, and where I was looking for it to buy new is about £60, which is out of the question. I didn't buy it for that. The Criterion version is much more normal priced, so take your pick, really. It's the same film, even if the disc is slightly different. My version of the film is Region B, UK only, but I do believe because it's Criterion, you will find a copy of that in your region. In the Curzon version of the book, there is an essay in the leaflet, and it's by noted Tarkovsky scholar Natasha Sinesio. There's a documentary about the film by a psychoanalyst and interviews with lead actors Banyonis and Bondarchuk. Criterion, by comparison, has additional commentaries and featurettes, including with the composer of the score, an interview with Stanislas Lem, an essay by film critic Philip Lapate, and an appreciation of the film by Kurosawa, and is much cheaper to buy right now. But I think what you'll get is, if you find a disc of this film, it's kind of highbrow. It's really elevated, but instead of like a picture gallery and like deleted scenes, it's quite detailed, sober reflections on what this film's about and its themes and its thoughts. That's the territory we're in. Okay, so what's the video like? It's gorgeous. It's amazing. It was shot on 35mm Agfa and Eastman film stock. Everything's shot on film back then. I mean, if I'm watching a more modern film, you get into a discussion of whether it was done on digital. This is all on film. Soviet-made lenses, so it inevitably looks different because it's just made with equipment that you only got in Russia at that time. Blown up to 70mm for some prints, so you do get a big image. As I said, it's the same source restored from an original print that Criterion used. The only differences are the Curzon, some people have said when I read reviews of this, have made it a bit brighter. Now, you may prefer Criterion's transfer for that reason, and frankly, you're paying a lot less for the Criterion version. The version I have looks absolutely stunning, especially in its Earth sequences. The space station environment isn't quite as shiny and impressive as 2001, but that's the point. It's, lockers, it's falling apart, it's the station's about to be closed. But it's about the dreamy, sort of strange, intense atmosphere. The flesh tones and the detail is really good on the Blu-ray. You get yourself a modern 4K TV, and it's a good Blu-ray that's had care taken over it. It does look terrific on screen, and you've got sort of flesh tones and colours, and all the different parts of the film do look really good. But the real star of this film are nature scenes on Earth. Before going up into space, you've got the time in which the main character, Kelvin, is visiting his family and thinking about his past and staring over the lake where he grew up and, being caught up in his past. He's already caught up in his past before he gets to Solaris. So guess what happens to him when he goes to Solaris. Then you have the visions that characters have while they're in space, which ties back to Earth. You've got water, you've got smoke, you've got rain, because it's a Tarkovsky film. It looks absolutely ravishing, although at times you are just on a space station set, and the video there is very good. The real kind of, hey, look at this moments are back on Earth. The sound is based on the original mono, but given a 2.0 stereo treatment here. The sound design is very haunting. They use dubbing on purpose for the voices, but they also use it so that some scenes have sound effects and some don't. Sometimes you can hear people's footsteps, sometimes you can't. That's all purposeful. That just adds to the atmosphere of the film. And, you have rain. There is a legendary scene where they're driving seemingly endlessly on a road before they get to the space station, before they travel. And it's the sound design is really sort of striking and shocking. You do have the sounds of rockets. You have nightmares. You have shocks. It's pretty good. Look, it's not Atmos or anything, but the sound design is crucial to the atmosphere of the film, but in a more subtle way than you would normally get. This is really, really great sound, actually. And as always, if they were to do a 4K Blu-ray of this, I mean, there's only so much better the sound can get. This is really excellent. So overall, my impressions of Solaris are it is a masterpiece. That doesn't sort of really cover what it is. It's a meditation. Sometimes it's more of an experience than just a story, which I found with Stalker as well. I think probably Stalker is the better film out of these two, but this is comparatively more accessible. The way the story's been written, it's full of resonance, thoughts of like memory, the unknown. What would intelligent life be like? Would we even be able to relate to them? Would they want to talk to us? Would we be able to hear what they're saying? It's interesting to compare it to something like Arrival, which is all about the challenge of communicating with extraterrestrial life from, in some ways, a more conventional, but also like an attempt to be mind expanding. This is kind of more about our own internal dream life, and it's not just a meditation by the filmmaker. I think it leads to a meditation by the audience. I mean, if you watch it and you find your thoughts wandering to other things, it's like that's okay, because this film leaves you space to do that, and then gets you really caught up. You do get caught up in the story of Kelvin and his wife, and his wife's the version of his wife that appears on the space station in Solaris, and how that becomes its own person, even though it's not human, and everything that those people are wrestling with up there as a representation of what we're wrestling with down here. It's interesting compared to 2001. What's it about? I don't know. It's probably about something else for you than it is for someone else, because that's the atmosphere, that's the thing that this film creates. But it's a really fascinating film. It's really beautifully made. It's Tarkovsky doing this thing that only really he does, because the likes of Alex Garland and Christopher Nolan and other people, they do go into this territory, but they're doing something different. You only get Tarkovsky with Tarkovsky. So I think this is an absolutely fascinating film, which I've gone back to over time. Like I said, it's a different film every time. It stays with you, it sticks with you. I've actually sat sort of thinking about this film before I came and sat down to talk about it. I've been busy with other things. It's been a little while since I've done one of these, but maybe only a couple of weeks. But in that couple of weeks, I've really thought about, what am I going to say about this film? What do I think about this film? And I think that's the strength of the movie overall, is that it really does worm its way into your head and just do something that other films don't do. So I think it's an absolutely, incredible film that everyone should check out. Is it an essential purchase? Yes, I think so. I'm not sure if it's going to work for everyone, so maybe you should watch it, you should stream it and see what you think. But I just think there are essential films. I don't mean to sound all highbrow. I know the Blu Ray is full of essays by psychologists. I'm not really interested in being like a highfalutin sort of cineast in that way. I am just a fan of movies. But there are certain filmmakers who are absolutely essential, and Tarkovsky is one of them. You really should watch as many of his films as you can, and once you've watched them, I think they are worth owning, because you should find yourself just not even sort of staring at your shelf and thinking about the film, but doing something else in your life and thinking about the film, and then saying, I should watch that again. And then you need it on your shelf to do that, and then you come back to it, and it's a different experience every time. Right now, you probably want to go for the Criterion. I do like my Curzon version of the movie, but I think Criterion is the one that you're going to get most commonly now. They've both got lots of features, and it's pretty much the same movie on there. So look, fill your boots, go for this film. I think it's an absolutely essential purchase. So that's Solaris. I hope you enjoyed me talking about it. I certainly enjoyed talking about it with you. There will be another film review like this along soon. As I said, if you like this chat about physical media, please do check out the Double Reel Film podcast. Hopefully it'll give you something as well. And ways to find the podcast and our socials will be on the screen in a moment. But in any event, I hope to see you again for more physical media chat right here on Maximum Disc. The Maximum Disc YouTube channel is brought to you by Double Reel, the monthly magazine podcast for the discerning film nerd. If you like our celebration of physical media, please check out the podcast for more chat about the films we love and hate.